G'day and welcome to Pellowe Talk. My name is Dave Pellowe, and today is going to be the last one for a little while of our regular Monday shows. We're going to be putting a lot of time into essentially figuring out how we can better serve the audience here at The Good Source. And there's a lot of effort and resources that go into this weekly show. And I think one of the things this nation is sorely missing is a regular news broadcast. So we're going to try and bring you something that you are missing. Everybody who's turned off the 6 o'clock news, put your hand up now. Yep, you. We want to make something for you. What did you turn off the 6 o'clock news for? We're going to get rid of those elements and try and bring you a 5 days a week news service, which actually just tells the truth without progressive euphemisms, leftist agendas, and normalization of abnormal, atypical, all the toxic anti-family, anti-Christian, anti-conservative, anti-truth, anti-justice, anti-liberty agendas that so proliferate and pollute the lying harlot media. That's what we want to put a lot more time and effort into that. By the way, if you think you've got some skills you'd like to contribute to that in any way on a voluntary basis, if you've got some time, let me know. We're looking for people to be a brains trust. What is the news? What's the news that's not being told? Sometimes the lying harlot media tells lies. Sometimes they just ignore the truth. Classic case in point, the Hunter Biden laptop story. It was just not a story. They didn't lie about it. They just ignored it, buried it, swept it under the rug. That's the kind of thing we're going to need. Eyes and ears bringing us tips and snippets to say, look, here's the news. Let's tell Australians this. So that's one of the things we want to spend a lot of the volunteer and staff time that we've got. And of course, increasing resources will be able to do more of everything that needs happening, especially these important opinion commentary shows. It doesn't mean we're going to stop doing them. We're just going to probably not be able to do them weekly. We'll do them as needs and headlines arise. But we can't have enough of those conversations. And so joining me today on Pellowe Talk, the panel is Bernie Finn, MP, a member of the Legislative Council in Victoria, as well as Alexandra Marshall, editor of The Spectator Online Flat White. Thank you very much both for joining me on Pellowe Talk.
Very great pleasure, Dave. Good to see you.
Thank you for having us.
I'd actually like to talk about the Victorian election, but I'm not sure we'll get there just yet. We'll weave into it as we can.
And down here too.
Say again?
A lot of people are down here are saying that too. We're not sure whether we're going to get there.
Will we survive until, what is it, November 26th?
26 it is, yes, yeah.
Yeah, November 26th. That'll be great. Looking forward to it. And Bernie, in all honesty and any pretense of objectivity aside, I am rooting for you to get back in. And I recommend anybody who has the name Bernie Finn on their ballot to put number one beside it.
I'm running as number one candidate for the DLP. In the Western Metro, and I've represented the Western suburbs for a long time, and I'm hoping that they'll put me back for at least another 4 years. That would be very good, and I'll continue to be their mouth in Spring Street.
That'd be fantastic. I think that would be good for Victoria and good for Australia to have a genuine Christian conservative in the halls of power at Spring Street, Victoria, for as long as possible. Bernie, you were at the CPAC event this weekend, and it was an inspiring weekend. I really wanted to go. I had my tickets all lined up, ready to go, and then I looked at the airfares, and it was just astronomical. There's no way I could justify an $800 return flight for the conference.
Yeah, I booked a couple of months ago, so
smarter than me.
So heard it was on. I booked the airfares, so I got it for $500 return, which is still over, but not as bad as you're suggesting. Dave, it was just the most extraordinary weekend, the most amazing weekend, and if I can say, I left Sydney yesterday with a spring in my step and joy in my heart. Because I felt that the weekend brought something that I hadn't fully anticipated, and that is, the CPAC has been, to a degree, even in its early days, has been a catalyst for change. But what it is becoming now is a movement in its own right. And that's something that I think we've long needed here in Australia. We've long needed a pure conservative movement here in Australia, and just like they have in the United States. And I'm very, very excited about what lies ahead. And I said to Andrew Cooper on Sunday night, I'm really keen to get involved in this because I can see some really big and exciting things happening for conservatism and the issues that conservatives care about. I can see some really big things happening in the few years ahead here in Australia. It's a very, very exciting time.
It is indeed. I'm kicking myself that I wasn't able to make it there. But as generous as the supporters are, it just didn't quite stretch to airfares plus accommodation plus tickets plus all the everything else. With especially the upcoming work we're doing. And the point of it is, it was an unmissable show. Alexandra, Marshall, your thoughts. How good was the conference, the weekend, and how useful do you think CPAC is going to continue to become as it emerges as the most popular conservative conference in Australia?
Well, CPAC is fascinating because it is one of the few times when conservative voices of the public and of the voters is actually louder than that of the conservative movement's leaders. And it's also a rare opportunity when conservative leaders get the opportunity to hear live and to talk with their voters and find out what they really think. And for too often in Australia, we have the conservative leaders in a bubble, whereas in like the UK and America, there's far more interaction between the voting public and their politicians. But here at CPAC, everyone was able to mingle together. They were able to speak with each other, which is fabulous. And it's invaluable for a political leader and also for a political movement like the conservative movement to sort of have a little check to see what the people actually think of past events, especially after such a turmoil as the last 2 years of COVID, where the Liberal Party, who are the main conservative movement, and the minor parties really do need to take stock of what happened and find out what their voters think that they should do next.
Was there a particular section of the conference, Bernie, that you found the most enjoyable, the most stimulating, and perhaps helpful to the average right-thinking voter in Australia?
Well, I thought, whoever put the program together really knew what they were doing, because they started off with a truly inspirational woman called Jacinta Price, who's now a federal senator, and her opening address was superb, and she set the standard for the rest of the weekend. I thought Matt Canavan spoke strongly about the importance of the family, spoke strongly about the importance of children, and his address, I thought, was quite spectacular. So if you're watching, Matt, well done. I'm glad to hear we've got one Matt somewhere who knows what they're talking about. But he really was quite spectacular. And can I say that the Battleground Melbourne presentation on Sunday afternoon did trigger me a little, but it really was spectacular. It's the only word I can use. It was spectacular. It was stark, and I think it shook a lot of people to their core, myself included, and just brought back all of those horrible, dreadful memories that we have of what happened in Melbourne over the last 2 years, and it's perhaps reminded me of the importance of well, I don't need to be reminded, but it did anyway. The importance of removing the Andrews government, because they have done this. They were the ones who beat up freedom protesters. I mean, it was just extraordinary what happened here in Melbourne, and I thought that they did a great job. And of course, to finish off with the inimitable Alan Jones, who received a standing ovation at the beginning and a standing ovation at the end. And as he said, he didn't think little old him would get a standing ovation. He got two. Damn fine effort. But he went a little bit over time, but we could have stayed there all night, because he really was quite a remarkable man. he's getting on a bit, I suppose. But the mind is as sharp as a tack, and you couldn't compare him to Joe Biden in any way. So it was a great finish, great in the middle, and great at the end. So it really was a superb conference all up, just magnificent.
Yeah. No one would dare.
Sorry.
No one would dare to interrupt Alan Jones. I mean, it doesn't matter what the timer said on his meeting. He was going to go for as long as Alan Jones was going to go for, and the audience was 100% there for it. But I'd also like to do a special shout out to the Japanese representative of CPAC, because not only was he very good looking and the girls in the audience were all there for him, but he also made the interesting point that Japan and Australia now have a special relationship because of their shared conservative politics, which is quite astonishing considering what happened in the Second World War, that they have now come so close. And he did invite all of us to go to CPAC in Japan, although I don't know how many of us can speak Japanese, but it was sweet of him to do so. Of course, you can't go past Nigel Farage, who was one of the leading headlines in the act when people were there. Funny story, just briefly, I've been standing all day because I kept walking in and out. And so I ended up not having a seat, so I had to stand most of the time. And I took my shoes off because I was in heels, and girls are like, it hurts. And just as I took my heels off, in walks Nigel Farage behind me to get in the lift. And I was like, God damn it. I mean, honestly, that was I was all perfect. And no, he walks in when I'm in bare feet. So that's such an Australian thing. Hopefully he doesn't hold that against me.
I want to pick up on what you said, Bernie, about Battleground Melbourne, and just give that a plug. If anybody watching the show right now hasn't seen Battleground Melbourne, here is the website where you can go and watch it. You can watch it there for free. I would recommend and encourage you to make a donation to support the filmmakers. It has won International Film Festival awards. This is a globally successful video and movie. It's a proper made movie. I know the filmmaker, who unfortunately had to be credited anonymously, because having a film business and a video production business, it's heavily dominated by leftists, and you risk losing your entire career if you actually get credited in making a right-wing documentary. And this is about as truth-telling as it gets, the way a documentary should be. I guess part of the truth being told is that the credits had so many anonymous contributors in them. But that is to just pump its tires up and say, go and watch Battleground Melbourne if you haven't watched it yet.
Did it win any awards in Victoria?
It even won awards in Victoria, Ellie?
No, did it win any awards in Victoria, or were they too kind to give it anything?
No, I'm pretty sure they're all international film festivals.
Yeah.
Nothing local. We're far too socialist a nation and people.
The only thing they'll win in Victoria is 12 months jail. That's about the only thing they'll get.
That's right. Battleground Melbourne. Yeah. Look, I think we have to move to the uncensored version of the show now. So I just want to encourage you to share this video on social media. The live stream will stay up for the whole hour. You don't need to go anywhere. But if you are watching the recording of this later, we're not going to support Facebook and YouTube by leaving long videos up there. And we're not going to cooperate with their dictates of abhorrent community standards, which are anti-truth, anti-justice, and anti-Christian and anti-family. They're abusive and they're horrible. So to fight back against big tech, would you do me a favor and go and watch the rest of this video on goodsource.news right now, please. We're going to have a short break, and when we do that, that's where this recording will end. But please, if you're watching live, don't go anywhere. Please share the video, get other people to join us, add your comments and add your criticisms, and let's have that conversation together.
May all that you stand for and that we stand for be preserved under the providence of God for the happiness of mankind.
The trouble is caused by unthinking people who carelessly throw away ageless ideals as if they were old and outworn machinery.
But it is the values of individual liberty, equality before the law, and the supremacy of people over the state to which we can always with confidence return as a powerful and uniting force.
Australia is not a secular country. It is a free country.
Well, as I said, I couldn't afford the airfares to go down to CPAC, and I'm kicking myself what I've missed out on. Just so terrible. And I'm so thankful to Andrew Cooper and ADH TV for putting on the live stream so I can go and watch so much of that. We're going to talk more about CPAC in just a minute, but what I did spend the money that I would have spent my airfares on is going to Adelaide, because in just 1 month's time, on the 5th of November, we're going to be hosting Church and State Adelaide, a conference designed to gather Christians in particular, not just conservatives, but Christians, people who hold to a cultural Christian ethic, a Bible-believing value system, which we believe would be a great blessing for our neighbours, the ideal policy settings for Australia. It doesn't mean we're after a theocracy where the church should be the government. No, we still believe one man, one vote, but we want to see Christians get off their bum, get into the public square and actually be counted and be heard. And there's a very biblical basis for that. So if you're already off your bum and in the public square, bring a friend along who needs to be convinced of the same. One of the most common feedbacks I get after a church and state conference, whether it's small or large, is I wish I had have known it was going to be like this, because I would have brought more people. It's not a political conference. It's not your average church conference. It's a good combination of both. It's very entertaining, highest caliber speakers only. Senator Alexandra will be joining us as a speaker in Adelaide, as well as the indomitable James McPherson, who's always entertaining and amusing. Head to churchandstate.com.au now, grab your tickets, and we'd love to see you there. Now, we actually going to watch a clip now about from Malcolm Roberts, and he had a little bit of valuable, I think, fiery contributions to the CPAC conference. He's not afraid to bite the hand that feeds him and tell it exactly like it is. So, Chris, if that's ready, let's watch that video.
In this last election, the Liberal Party and the National Party chose to preference the Labor Party ahead of One Nation in many races. In the end, delivering the Senate to the ALP and neutering the Liberal Party. So what the hell is going on? Like many people here, I do hope the Liberals rediscover their roots in true liberalism, true conservatism. It would, however, be unbelievable if the Liberals achieved that in a single weekend-long pep rally. Where is Peter Dutton, can I ask? Seriously, I thought I was coming to CPAC. It feels more like LPAC, Liberal Political Action Conference. I must say, CPAC is back from their 3-year COVID hiatus with a very short memory. Returning to their conservative roots will take fundamental changes in the power structure of a party that quite simply sold Australia out. The best way to help the Liberal Party, for those who want to help the Liberal Party, is to expose the cracks, not paper them over. And not just during COVID, but going back to the days of John Howard and his implementation of the 1997 UN Kyoto Protocol that stripped property rights from farmers to meet targets imposed by the UN without compensation, and going around the Constitution to do so. That has never been set right, and we need to set it right. If the Liberals want to embrace conservatism, now that setting that right might be a good place to start. Who was it that locked Western Sydney residents into their homes and put troops to the streets to keep them there? Who was that? Gladys Berejiklian's Liberal government. Who closed their state off to the rest of Australia, imposed business closures, restricted movement, and forced medical mandates on their citizens? That was the Liberal Marshall South Australian government. Who changed the rules to allow emergency health orders under the Biosecurity Act and then tore up the vaccine approval rulebook while sharing your vaccine status with anyone who wanted to see it? Always remember that. That was the Liberal Morrison government. If the Liberal Party want their supporters to hold the line, as we heard yesterday, then they need to change their leadership, change their policies, apologise for their failures, and start again truthfully and honestly. And they need to call a royal commission into COVID, although maybe under Albanese, it might be better if they just let the senators get on with having a Senate select inquiry into it, because we can ask the questions that need to be asked. Liberal Premier Perrottet could do that right now. He could have an inquiry. I also heard a speaker in favour of retaining the two-party system, Nick Cater. I disagree completely. Nigel Farage said, go and elect the best people you can, regardless of party. And if the Conservatives have governed as Liberal Democrats, Social Democrats rather, get rid of them. It was not a two-party system that delivered Conservatives a victory in Italy. That was a multi-party coalition. It was not a two-party system that delivered Conservatives to government in Sweden. That was a multi-party coalition. While Brexit did deliver the first black eye to the globalists, as another speaker mentioned, the Conservatives didn't do that. It was one man who built up an army in the people. And that's what we need here. Nigel Farage did that.
I think one of the tragedies of CPAC has probably been glossed over a little bit because of what Nick Cater went on to say and the reaction to Nick Cater. But I think when Amanda Stoker, immediately following this speech, said aloud, a little bit passively aggressively, wouldn't it be great if we spent more time at this conference attacking those on the other side instead of those on our side? I think that really missed the entire point of why her pre-selection spot was so low and why she didn't end up getting a Liberal Senate spot in the federal election altogether, why the Morrison government lost altogether. And that's because there are so many people in the Liberal Party who are on the other side. They're the people who spend all their time trying to eradicate Conservatives and Christians from the Liberal Party. They are spending and exerting a lot of energy, both rhetorically and publicly, in the PR battle and in the actual factions in the party itself, attacking Christians and Conservatives. So a speech like Malcolm Roberts just gave then is precisely attacking people on the other side. And a conference like that is exactly the right place where we should be focusing on and debating those issues, not indulging in some kind of Liberal Party backslapping, self-congratulatory echo chamber. Bernie Finn, you are just one such person, perhaps the most recent exact example of somebody who has been persecuted, an elected member of Parliament, persecuted out of and expelled from the Liberal Party by the current Victorian Liberal Party leader, Matthew Guy. And you've been kicked out of the party because of a classic Conservative position, and that is being pro-life and condemning the child sacrifice industry in Australia. What are the merits, do you think, of what Malcolm Roberts had to say then? And what were your thoughts when Amanda Stoker had that to say about his speech moments later?
Well, I thought Amanda probably missed the mark a bit. I've got a lot of time for Amanda, and I'm really disappointed that she's no longer in Parliament, because I thought she was an outstanding Conservative senator. What we have to do is we have to stop listing people as Liberal or Labor or National. We should be listing them as Socialists or Conservatives or whatever the left of the Liberal Party is these days. We have to start speaking in those sorts of terms. Quite frankly, here in Victoria, the Liberal Party's a total mess because it does not know what it believes in. I mean, we have seen over the last few months the Liberal Party in Victoria vote in the state parliament, vote for the Aboriginal Treaty and support the government's position on emissions, which is to the left, further to the left than the Albanese government. It's just staggering. And the number of Liberals that I've spoken to and people that have been in the party for a very long time are just walking away, and it's good for me, I have to say, because a lot of people are coming to me and saying, "How can I help you?" Because this mob are hopeless, and yes, they are hopeless, and it's very, very sad to see. And I have got to say to you that, and I said this on Facebook yesterday, if the Liberal Party continues down this path of betraying its conservative base, the Liberal Party will die. There is no question about that. It will die. It will be dead. It will be dead within a decade, and that's probably giving it far more time than it is either due or we would expect. It will die because the base of the Liberal Party is comprised almost entirely of conservative people. That's why they joined the Liberal Party. You see people like Matt Keane, for example, in New South Wales, James Newbury in Victoria, some of these clowns who really are in the wrong party. I mean, you look at these people and you think, you look to yourself, why are these people in the Liberal Party? Why? I mean, these people do not believe what Liberals believe, and it is destroying. It is destroying the Liberal Party, and it will be. If it's not already terminal, and it may well be. If it's not already terminal, it will be. And we saw what happened to the Morrison government. I suspect we're going to see what happens to Matthew Guy in November. In this time next year, and I'm just trying to think when the Tasmanian election is, but this time next year, there is a better than even chance that there will be no Liberal governments left in Australia.
Yeah, Alexandra Marshall.
Matt, can I add that bit about Amanda Stoker first, just quickly? Amanda Stoker has exactly the same problem as the Liberal Party has, in that she held a position of power, she speaks to conservative values, but she didn't once vote against the tyranny that overtook the country when it mattered. And because she didn't act upon her principles, the public were viewing her at CPAC in the same way that they viewed the Liberal Party, as dishonest and as betraying them. And Amanda Stoker and the rest of the Liberal Party, doesn't matter how great their history was at the party, which is what Nick Minchin's problem was. He kept saying how great his history was. Well, no one cares what you did in the past. They care what you did in the last 2 years and what you say now. And the power of CPAC was about listening to the public. And the critical mistake that these Liberal Party people made is they arrogantly ignored the feedback of their party members instead of stopping on stage and going, "I'm sorry, I clearly made a mistake. Our party made a mistake. These are the ways in which we are going to try and undo and apologize for our past." Now, that is such an essential thing that was missed by the Liberal Party and that they will now suffer for later on in the press. Absolutely. But also, Alan Jones made the point that it's not parties that are moving toward conservative values. It is individuals with charismatic power and great principles, people like Farage, who changed the course of the UK's history with his Brexit movement, people like Trump, who dragged the Republican Party into power when they were not going down that street, people like Ron DeSantis. It is not coming from a party reform, which is what the Liberals were begging for. It has to come from Liberal leaders, and they have to be honest.
Yeah. I want to ask you, Alexandra, about what Bernie said about the death of the Liberal Party in 10 years or so, and added at if it betrays the Conservative base, and then at the end saying if it's not terminal already. I want to say, for the record, the last Victorian election, the West Australian state election, the South Australian state election, we've seen the Liberal Party be absolutely decimated in loss of incumbency and elections where not incumbent, just losing numbers to the point of not even really forming a party in Parliament anymore. Is it already dead? What does death look like if this isn't it?
Well, the population of any civilization is always split about half between conservatives and left-leaning socialists, roughly. That shifts a little bit depending on how good the leadership of a particular movement is, but that's a constant throughout most of civilization. Now, the problem comes when a party who represents one of those movements, say the Conservatives, starts moving off the general values and principles of the people who vote for them, that's when a party collapses and dies. And it's happened before many times in the Westminster system and in other systems of government. So the whole point of having the minor parties in the Westminster system is to give the major parties a hint that if minor parties are on the rise, then the major party has wandered too far off of its popular and election-winning position. And what the Liberals are doing is, instead of going, gee, isn't it strange that all these conservative parties are sort of popping up, let's put them last under Labor when we're preferencing people, they are fundamentally failing to understand the warning signs that their movement is dying, because they are becoming a Labor light version. But worse than that, they have no leaders that are worth following. And so when you've got state leadership, we're seeing the parties die in the states. That's partly because they've got no spine, and mostly because they've got leaders that nobody wants to vote for, because human beings will vote for strength, even if it's tyrannical strength. So I guarantee you in Victoria, doesn't matter how badly Daniel Andrews abused them, how much they lost during it, they're going to stand there and vote for Daniel Andrews again, because, you know, he exists as a strong person, even if he's a terribly evil person. Because Matthew Guy, the only thing people know about him is that he had dinner with mobsters. I mean, that's pretty much the only publicity that has sunk through in the mainstream, and that was courtesy of some activists who hate him. Now, that is not enough for a Liberal Party to win. And who was it, Kirk up in WA, who basically said, I'm not here to win? I mean, this is not how Conservative parties survive.
If he wasn't there to win, he succeeded there very, very admirably. Look, the Liberal Party made a huge mistake last year when they replaced a guy who the public was ambivalent about at that point. They hadn't made up their minds. They replaced him with somebody that the public hated. Now, that seemed to be at the time to be a very, very strange thing to do. Looking at the polls as we are, 6 weeks out from when polling begins, it's even stranger now. I just don't understand what people were thinking at the time. The Liberal Party will pay a very, very big price, I believe, for that mistake, but also for not having any beliefs at all, and for betraying those who have supported the Liberal Party loyally. I mean, I was a member of the Liberal Party for 41 years. They turfed me out for being conservative. That sent a message right across Victoria.
Bernie, what? Here's a fundamental question: what do voters get if they vote for Matt? Well, what do they actually get? Do they get? He didn't oppose the vaccine stuff. He didn't oppose what Daniel Andrews did. He's more left than Daniel Andrews on net zero policies. He wants to give more money to renewables things. Like, what do they actually get if they vote for Matt? I mean, no one can answer if there's anything conservative about him or about the party.
Well, I'd say to you that what Matthew Guy has brought to the Liberal Party the second time as leader is pretty much what he brought the first time, and that's not much at all. His attitudes toward a range of things really depend on who he's talking to at the time. And that's not how you run a political party. That's not how you run a government. At least with Despot Dan, we know where he's coming from. We know where he's going to, and that's scary, I have to say. But with Matty, whatever his name is this week, we can't be sure at all, because he does change so often. And I know that he is a climate change skeptic, because he has told me many times. But yet he's now, running with the dogs and chasing the hounds, or whatever that term is, and chasing votes on the back of climate change, which he
worse.
Ridiculous.
That's worse. That is far worse. If you are involved, if you're a diehard supporter of climate change, well, fine. At least you're being honest to your principles. But if you know it's wrong and you're still prepared to throw public money at it and to impoverish the rest of your state with energy bills they can't afford, businesses they can't run, and demands on their liberty that are unacceptable, well, then you are worse than Daniel Andrews. I have no time for conservatives who don't value their principles.
Yeah, look, I've got to agree. And, the fact of the matter is there are a lot of Liberal, not just members, but Liberal voters who are looking at the Liberal Party, and they're asking exactly the same question, Alexandra, that you asked. Why the hell should we vote for these people? And nobody's giving them an answer.
Yep.
Nobody is giving them an answer. And, they're talking about health a lot, and that's great. Health's a very important issue. But, we have got, in this state, we have got around about $170 to $175 billion debt at this point in time. So we, how we would turn that back, how we would actually do anything about that, that's not being addressed by the Liberal Party. And I mean, that's talking about the state's future. That's talking about burdening not just my kids, but my grandkids and possibly my great-grandkids with a debt that they're going to be paying off for many, many years to come. There is no depth to any philosophical position, any ideological position, and people just don't.
One of the things that I've seen, we've all seen, but I'm just going to observe it for the conversation now, is that the Liberal Party in Queensland and South Australia, at the very least, probably other states as well, there have been concerted efforts by the party branch, not the parliamentary branch, but the party branch, to expel people who are from minor conservative parties. When Cory Bernardi's party collapsed and he shut it down, and they got rid of Malcolm Turnbull, a whole bunch of conservatives wanted to go back to the Liberal Party and be part of that movement, and they were rejected en masse, coldly and clinically. There's also been in South Australia, headlines in the newspaper about the move to expel Christians and conservatives who have been recruiting to the Liberal Party. Well, we don't want you guys doing a recruitment drive for the Liberal Party. That's no good. We like it as it is. I want to know why it's not a valid strategy to put the shoe on the other foot. I agree that the Liberal Party should be a broad church. It should be a broad tent which invites people from disparate tribes to unite and fight against socialism and collectivism and all the various forms of that. That should welcome people right of centre like conservatives and Christians and classical liberals and the such like. But is it such a big tent that it's a circus tent and includes clowns like Malcolm Turnbull and Simon Birmingham and Matthew Guy? I think if we have a look at the Liberal Party's value statements, these are things I can get behind, and I just wish the Liberal Party would get behind them. For example, during the last few years, the Federal Liberal Party and many of its state branches certainly did not believe in the inalienable rights and freedoms of all peoples. No, we can absolutely alienate rights and freedoms when we deem it to be in the greater good. That's called fascism. The Liberal Party says they work towards a lean government that minimises interference in our daily lives. What? That's exactly the opposite of what Liberal governments and politicians said over the last 2 or 3 years during the COVID emergency. I would love it if the Liberal Party actually believed those things and got back into it. And so, maybe there is a point that we could get back to the Liberal Party. Maybe the Liberal Party doesn't need fixing if only it was true to itself. And that's perhaps what Nick Minchin was saying in this clip we're about to show at CPAC, which went down like a lead balloon. Chris, let's play that video.
A lot this weekend, people are saying, the party's changed or whatever. I mean, is the party an immutable force, and can people still actually get in and change it from within if they were committed?
Well, to be frank, I don't know that the Liberal Party needs a whole lot of changing. It has profound...
I thought...
calm down, will you?
I thought we were a conservative gathering.
You're worse than a socialist audience. Give me a chance to speak.
I feel like I found myself on the set of Q&A. But come on, please allow Nick to finish what he's going to say. Now, come on, a little bit of courtesy. We are courteous on the Conservative side. Nick.
Listen, I was a profound Conservative and fought every Conservative fight in the Liberal Party for 30 years. I was on the trenches. I know what it's like. So I'm not going to take any, rubbish from you lot. I'm sorry. The Liberal Party's values are values you should all support. Go and read the platform of the party. Read We Believe. We stand for small government. We stand for low taxation. We stand for federation. We stand for good government. Now, the candidates we select are a function of you. It's a function of the members of the party. We have plebiscites around Australia. We select the candidates. and we decide who goes into Parliament. And it's our job as party members to keep them honest. Okay? Now, I know you're all disappointed in the last 9 years of government.
Well,
I am too.
Let's give everybody their say, eh? Come on, please. Fair's fair. We've heard from a variety.
Well, Alexandra Marshall, you had a bit to say, and your comments were actually made. I don't know if you saw, your tweet was embedded in a News Limited article. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
You are Insta-famous. But what was your thoughts about that, the thoughts you shared with the Twitterverse and got republished courtesy of Murdoch?
Send me that later on if you wouldn't mind. I think the primary thing there was when he said fair's fair. The audience are thinking to themselves, what do you mean fair's fair? We've had 2 years of crap from your party and you're telling us, you're reprimanding us for having a voice for the first time and telling what we think. As someone posted a comment as we were watching that, it's hubris what Nick Minchin was going on with there. But the point is that the Liberal Party didn't believe the values that Nick Minchin was referencing before COVID, because I remember sitting down when I decided to join One Nation, reading the party platforms and reading their policies and realizing the Liberals had no idea what their actual statement said if you were to read the policies that match. And if Nick Minchin truly believed with as much passion as he put up on that stage, the values of the Liberal Party, he would have been the leading figure in the press every single day out there in front of the camera, giving Scott Morrison a hard time, giving Perrottet a hard time for the garbage that they put the people through and the voting public through. And yet he was silent along with the rest of the Liberal Party. And that's why the people in that audience booed him. And you couldn't hear it in that recording. But aside from net zero, what they were shouting was, you betrayed us. And that is something that trying to rest on your laurels and lecture the public, which he did in a second video later on. Like, this was not the first time he was booed. He was booed again when he tried to double down on it, because the public no longer believe the Liberals believe their own party policies and their own mission statement. And they will never get over that whenever they act like Nick Minchin did there.
Bernie, the question which Nick Minchin was responding to from Nick Cater was, is the Liberal Party, is the party an immutable force, or can people still get in and change it from within? Now, it sounds to me like he's describing, he's intending to describe the push, the impetus that people like Senator Alex Antic are having successfully in the South Australian branch, where they are doing an effective recruitment drive of genuine Conservatives. They're not paying for people's memberships. They're not controlling their votes. It's not branch stacking. It's 100% legitimate and ethical and within constitutional guidelines. They are recruiting members to the party in the view of renewing it to its Conservative roots. They are doing it well. But it sounds to me like what he's describing is the actual long march through the institutions, such as the infiltration by left-wing Marxists into the Liberal Party, who have proven that you can actually get in and change it from within. And so how would you have answered that question if asked by Nick Cater? Is the party an immutable force, or can people still get in and change it from within?
Well, I think I have to say to you, Dave, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to change the party. I was absolutely staggered when I heard Nick make that statement that he didn't think the party needed a lot of change. I have had a lot of time for a long time for Nick Minchin, but I was absolutely staggered when I heard him say that, because the party doesn't need change, it needs revolution. That's what it needs, because it does not stand for anything that it used to stand for, it's supposed to stand for. It reminds me, Sir Robert Menzies back in the 70s didn't bother hiding the fact that he voted DLP because he thought that the Liberal Party at that time had gone too far to the left. I think if Sir Robert was still with us, he'd probably be doing that again, because the party, like I'll give you, for example, for last year, there was a bill before the Victorian Parliament on conversion therapy. Now, we as a party, and I say we, voted in the party room to support that bill. Now, that was a bill that stepped on the rights of Christians, of parents. It was a law that was against the right of assembly, the right of free speech, the right of freedom of religion, the right of parents to protect their children, the right of doctors to consult their patients. I mean, it was just the most appalling piece of legislation imaginable, and it was the only time I've ever crossed the floor. And that may well have been the beginning of the end for me. But I couldn't support it, and I wouldn't support it. And the vast majority of members of the Liberal Party felt exactly the same way. But yet the Parliamentary Party voted to support it, and indeed did support it when it went to the upper house. And when that sort of thing is happening, and then you have people like Nick Minchin say the Liberal Party doesn't need change. Hey, we've got a credibility issue here. Somebody's either not aware of what's going on, or they're having a lid of us. And I'd like to think that Nick, I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I just, I think, as I said before, I think the Liberal Party doesn't need change. It needs major revolution, and I can't see that happening anytime soon.
And you know what else made it worse? I don't know if we actually played the whole clip, but on 3 separate occasions, while the crowd was booing, the people on stage accused the crowd of being socialists. The irony of accusing a conservative audience, complaining about how far left their leaders have gone, of being socialist, did not help their cause.
No. And
you know what? I think the point was probably that it would have been helpful if they had been at least courteous. Now, it doesn't mean...
Why should they be courteous? Like, why should they be courteous? These leaders never get an opportunity
to believe in free speech.
No, because it's politics.
Veto. We don't believe in the heckler's veto.
Courteous. Politics has never been courteous. Winston Churchill, he had to stand up and face the crowds, and he had to convince hostile crowds that his was the way forward. And if the Conservatives cannot do that with their own audience and face a little bit of backlash, then they are not skilled enough to lead the party out of the mess that it's in. I mean, this is politics.
You're absolutely right, but we have to be capable of acknowledging when we've made a mistake. You're right. Nick Minchin and the people on stage reacted badly. But they shouldn't have gone off it, and they shouldn't have called them socialists. But nevertheless, their point was right, is that the people in the audience reacted badly. They should practice what they preach. If you believe in free speech, then don't engage in the heckler's veto. Let somebody
I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you at all. The crowd,
okay.
the people on stage were happy to take the cheers. They loved the cheers. They loved being interrupted by cheers. And if you make a mistake and get interrupted by boos instead, well, that is the back and forth that a live crowd will do.
We don't disagree. The people on stage should have taken it on the chin. But I think the people in the audience didn't behave ideally. Bernie, go ahead.
Alexandra, 100%. I mean, if you're prepared to get up there and face an audience, and it was a fairly substantial audience, there was, probably 800, 900 people in the room, if not more. If you're prepared to stand up and say the sorts of things like Nick mentioned, there's nothing wrong with the Liberal Party. And then Nick made a statement which I thought inflamed the situation no end when he said, I'm not going to listen to what you lot have to say. There is the problem the Liberal Party has. They don't listen to anyone about any. That is the problem. That is the problem. And I actually got up and walked out at that point. I said, I thought to myself, I got a cup of tea to have or something. There's something down here. I just couldn't.
And look, they were ways out of it. Bernie, there were ways out of that situation. Like, the host could have stopped it. Even someone like Amanda could have stopped it and said, obviously, listening to what we're hearing right now, there is a problem with the party. They could have stopped that and tried to appeal to their audience, but they didn't. And that shows you that they are not skilled politicians. They do not have a Farage level of skill or the skill of the US politicians that we had there on stage to react and to adapt and to learn, which was the opportunity that CPAC offered them. It was to learn from their crowd, and they didn't. They came there in their same bubble, and they left with their same bubble. If nothing else, they probably think, screw that crowd, because they're not going to follow us with their opinion. And that is so sad, because the public walked away going, well, they're not listening to us, so let's go and vote for minor party. So it was a failure on their behalf to convert more people to the Liberal cause. I think they fundamentally have made a mistake there that they will need to recover from publicly.
I agree. They need to use an opportunity like that. Sorry, Bernie, you go ahead. I was talking over you.
They said to the audience, screw you, and the audience said to them, "Screw you." You know, there was a real anger in that crowd on Sunday afternoon. It was Saturday afternoon. I can't remember. There was a bit of a blur on the weekend, but there was a real anger in the audience about what had been said, and for them to dismiss that. And I have to say, Tina McQueen's performance was just unbelievably bad as well. But, you know, for them to dismiss that when they should have been listening, they should have been taking a message, and that message being that, you know, the Liberal Party can no longer take Conservative voters for granted. You know, Conservative voters, and we've seen this right around Australia, are now voting for a variety of minor parties. And we go back to, well, I think it was the 2016 election where... was it Mark Textor or Linton Crosby said, we don't need Conservative voters.
Mark Textor.
Mark Textor. So a million Conservative voters went elsewhere. And that's just got worse since from the Liberal Party's perspective. So, you know, they have to get their act together. They have to think about this, because it's just not good enough to say, well, you know, I've got a strong Conservative voting record. That's great. That's, you know, and I pat Nick on the back. But, you know, going forward, and I hate that term, but going forward, that is just not acceptable for the majority of Australians.
Yeah, good comments. Topher Field has dropped into the comments and says, I love that this panel happened after the Battleground Melbourne session. The federal Libs were worse than useless at protecting human rights, did nothing for the people in Victoria, and the audience reaction says that they're not taking the crap anymore. Alexandra, exactly. I agree with you that any of the people on the panel could have taken the opportunity, taken stock of the reaction of the audience. If they had have missed the feedback from the nation so far, they could have at that point finally taken stock and missed and taken advantage of a golden opportunity to bring Conservatives into the party by showing a bit of humility and listening to the feedback. Just acknowledge it. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the audience reacted in a way that was integrous with their values, but the people on stage definitely reacted very badly and missed some great opportunities, as you said. Naomi, thank you for your comment. You've said, Naomi says, Minchin was probably right in that the Liberal Party policies don't need changing. Perhaps you mean anyway, she says, however, it's the Liberal Party politicians that need to go back to core values. So, yeah, if they were to be true to the website, I think we're all agreed on this panel today, if they were true to the website, they would be a very different party and a very different election outcome in itself. Right? Wrong? Thoughts, guys? Jump in.
Very much so.
The only person who had the grace to actually look uncomfortable was Tina McQueen, and I'm sure that's because she's had the same questions put to her on Sky several times. But again, didn't save the situation, but at least she didn't look like she was gloating. Amanda Stoker looked annoyed to be stopped halfway through her speech, which again, it's not, that was a time of reflection, I think. What I was going to say, Dave, is politics has always been about the crowds and about swaying public opinion with the strength of your conviction and your argument. And that is always a risk that a politician takes when they get up in front of a crowd. And the thing with CPAC is that's the first time that so many people in that crowd, but many of them who are unvaccinated and were locked in their homes for a long time, that's the first public appearance that they have come to freely and been able to face up against the party that helped to lock them down. And so anyone who was sensible would have understood that tensions were going to be exceptionally high in that room. And that, I mean, if I was a politician in the Liberal Party, the first thing I would have done is get on stage and apologise before I even tried to make a speech. Because, I mean, you would have to expect anger and aggression. And to be fair, I think the crowd was relatively reserved, considering if you actually spoke to the people who were in the audience, they were so angry. They were upset. They'd lost their livelihoods, their friends, their family. Some of them had been injured by vaccines. They were so furious. And I mean, a little bit of booing was by far a reserved reaction compared to what it could have been. And I think they did hold their nerve. And it was, I really do believe that if politicians want to be cheered, they have to accept that they're going to be booed.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I mean, that it's predictable when you're in the wild, but my point is just that this wasn't the wild. These were people. Yeah. Anyway, I've said enough.
If it was a dinner, if it was a dinner, I would agree. If it was a dinner, I would agree with you.
Alexandra Marshall, you're
No, if it was at a dinner, I would agree with you, Dave. If it was a pleasant dinner, I would totally agree. This was more like a rallying event, so I think it was a little bit different. But I have to say, look at I don't know if you realise, but Alan Jones was on shortly after. I think there's one act in between that and Alan Jones, and you could tell that he slightly changed his speech because he had a few little, not so gentle slaps back at what happened. And Malcolm Roberts as well, he changed his speech live in response to the crowds, which I think was a great move for a politician to adapt what they were going to say based upon what they heard at a live event. And can I just say a big shout out to all the international guests who came to speak to us, because we were fortunate to have the Americans come there. And they were also, funnily enough, apologetic for America, because poor Americans, they have Biden as their world leader, and they feel incredibly sorry for the world having to face up for that as the leader. And they were similarly disturbed by what they saw. But Farage, I think, if we're going to talk about conservatism, we're going to need a leader like Farage in Australia. We are going to need someone who is prepared to stand up against all the parties and to say, these are the values that we believe in, and we're actually going to follow them. Well, at least that person is going to follow them and be morally consistent. If that person appears, and it's not going to be doormat down in Victoria, if one of these people appears, then the rest of the Conservative Party will be able to rally behind them. But unfortunately, I don't know, Bernie or Dave, if you've seen, is there anybody in the Conservative movement who has enough charisma and enough strength and empathy to lead the Conservative movement? Because I can't find them. I haven't seen them. Even Dutton, whom I used to like, he's almost in screensaver mode. He doesn't seem to be present. Anyone having ideas of who could lead?
What concerns me, Alexandra, is that people who we've regarded as conservative now think that they have to modify their views once they gain the leadership in order to appease the other side of the party. That's what we need is a genuine, fair dinkum conservative. And the ones that you think are in that category, quite often once they get there, decide that they're not. And a lot of the reasons, I've often said about Tony Abbott, if Tony Abbott was as conservative as Prime Minister as he is now, he'd still be PM. I've got no doubt about that. But unfortunately, he wasn't.
Agreed.
We've got some major issues, and I have no doubt that if this continues, if the Liberal Party continues down this path, in a few years, somebody will come along, and I don't know who it's going to be. Somebody will come along and will bring these disparate groups together, disparate parties together, to form a new Conservative force. But I can't see the sort of reform or the sort of revolution that I spoke of happening in the Liberal Party. And I think we are in for a period of very, very difficult times, for not just for Conservatives, but for Australians generally. And that, I think, will actually speed up the sort of bringing together of the clans, as it were, to form a new Conservative brand.
Yeah, geez, look, if it was, I think the ideal situation that would work would be some kind of amalgamation or coalition between the minor parties. And I wish it were possible. I just think the ego's invested, and they are so bloody minded about their minute points of difference and singular aspects of focus, that they refuse to, consider the differences and work with. I mean, something the Liberal Party does right is unity and bringing those people together. Unfortunately, there's far too much tolerance in the Liberal Party, so that it's detrimental for the exact same reason that it's more effective than the minor parties. And that is, tolerating the people that don't belong in the party, such as the lefty Liberals. But the disparateness and the egos, which are central to the minor parties, are the greatest undoing. I mean, how many new minor right-wing parties, you want to take bets we're going to see in this 12 months? And how many have we already got? 3 or 4 springing up everywhere. And I mean, how is that ever going to be a recipe for success unless the voters across Australia suddenly become geniuses at understanding how the preferential system works, which proves to be too much to hope for year after year after year after year.
We've had it since 1992. You reckon somebody would work it out by now? I mean,
but also, it's a leaking ship, isn't it, Bernie? The minor parties are leaks coming off the main Liberal Party, and that there's no way to fix that. As I said before, the Liberals have to fix the leaks. That's why that exists.
Right, exactly right. As you know, as long as the Liberal Party continues down this path, as I said before, of betraying their Conservative base, then that base will continue to desert them. And if you haven't got a base, you haven't got a party. If you've forgotten why you exist, if you don't know what you believe in, why the hell do you exist? And that's the question the Liberal Party has to face and has to answer pretty soon, I'd suggest, very soon.
But also the first. Sorry.
Isn't the hope of trying to get the Liberal Party to fix itself the quintessential fool's errand? I mean, to get the people who are in charge of that to try and say, okay, well, now we'll embrace conservatives and abandon progressives. Now we will follow the recipe for success that we've seen in Florida and in Italy and other places where charismatic conservatives of conviction will get up and grab votes to themselves. They will lead the centre. They won't move to the centre to try and win an election. They will move the centre to them to win an election, and they do it successfully. And that's the way to do it. But do you think anybody who's currently in the Liberal Party can do that? I think what Alexandra is doing in South Australia, and it will not work in the short term. It's a fool's errand to think this will take 1 or 2 election cycles. I think it's a minimum of 10-year plan to try and flood the Liberal Party with right-thinking people who will then pre-select and elect after maybe 10, 15 years. This is not short term, but no invasion, no infiltration of the institutions was a quick march. It's the long march through the institutions which has made the Marxists dominate our culture and infiltrate the Liberal Party. And I think if we say that's a proven strategy and we learn from their success and we stop repeating the formulas for our failure, I think we've got a chance of replacing those people who will then be able to sit at the throttles of power, levers of power in the Liberal Party and go, you know what? We, the Liberal Party, need to return to our values, start embracing Christianity and family and conservatism and liberty again, and kick out the weeds that don't belong in this paddock, such as Matt Keane, etc. Ellie.
I disagree with you, actually. You might be happy about this disagreement for a change, Dave, in that although the rot of parties, when a party holds power and has held power for a long time, can be slow and insidious, where you get people sitting on safe seats for a long time and gradually degrading the party, politics has this incredible function in Westminster systems to be rapid as well, in which a single election cycle can fundamentally alter and repair a party, because it is like every election cycle is pretty much a clean slate. So if you get, and we see it in the US as well, if you get someone like a Trump in there who cleans out the garbage in one go, well, then you can reform a party in one go. It doesn't have to be a 10-year cycle, because politics is fickle. It depends upon public support. And if the public fall behind conservative values in one election strongly, then those people who have been eroding the party, they fall out of favor immediately and they're replaced on seats by conservatives. But to do that, as we've said, requires a leader of strength, because otherwise you get this quiet little seat warming position in which they change nothing over years. But the other great thing is, because when you get an election defeat, those people lose power. Well, they're only there for power. So they're not going to stand around for the next fight. They're going to go off and work for some industry or bureaucracy. They're going to leave. So the next round of people that you get will be there because they want to be there, because they think that they can latch on to the next true conservative goal. So we do have half a chance. And if we truly believe that we can reform the party and we have people who stand for that, then yes, it can take one election cycle, but you have to have that strength of character coming from the leader.
And I can't see Alexandra hate to say this, but I cannot see any strength from too many leaders at all in the Liberal Party. Any of them.
I 100% agree with you. I'm just saying that if they did have a strong leader, they could repair it in one cycle. The problem is that they don't.
That's true.
Sadly, I hate to be a pessimist, because I'm not a pessimist by nature. I'm a liberal, or used to be a liberal in the western suburbs. So I'm an optimist by nature. The fact that you look around the Liberal Party at the moment, and there's just nothing there. It's sad. I mean,
why is that?
Well, even Dom up in New South Wales, a rock solid conservative. He's there by virtue of the fact that he has the support of Matt Keane, and he has to behave himself. So it is just so overwhelmingly distressing to see the state of conservatism, not just in the Liberal Party, but other place, and that's why I'm so excited about CPAC and what CPAC can do, because, as I said right at the beginning, this movement it's become a movement. It was a catalyst for change. It's now becoming its own movement, and I can see that it will have a huge effect on the Liberal Party, if indeed the Liberal Party survives, and if it doesn't impact the Liberal Party, it will certainly have a big say in the formulation of a new Conservative Party down the track.
Yeah, that's quite potential. I actually think the problem you described, Bernie, the lack of good leadership material in the Liberal Party, is because right-thinking Conservatives have felt unwelcome in the Liberal Party for so long that they're not there.
Tell me about it.
So I think actually a strategic, patient re-infiltration of that party by Conservatives will bring those options back into it. And again, I do not have a short-term optimism. Alexandra is having great results in about 18 months or so in the South Australian branch, but I think that's phenomenal, probably an aberration. And I think setbacks are also inevitable. But if you take at least a 10-year picture for it, I think it's possible to build a pool of good talent in the Liberal Party worth voting for. Now, I want to go straight from that to answer this question from Mark. Mark says, are you able to be part of two parties, One Nation and Liberal Party, to help clean the swamp? Mark, that's an excellent question, because here's my thought. Joining the Liberal Party should not be an exercise in supporting the Liberal Party. Joining the Liberal Party should be an exercise in democracy. You're there not because you like the Liberal Party, but because you don't like the Liberal Party, because they don't represent you. And that problem cannot be solved unless you are there and turn up for the votes. The votes at the things that pre-select people like Bernie Finn, when you've got this strong, outspoken, pro-life conservative, pro-liberty conservative in the branch, and he loses by a handful of votes in a pre-selection, you need to be there to be that handful of people, so that 5 years from now, they can be the frontline leaders that we need in the movement. So I don't recommend supporting the Liberal Party. And here's how you have your cake and eat it too. You have your membership in the Liberal Party, you pay your fees, you turn up when you needed to vote, and you support the good guys. And this is how you actively oppose the progressives in the Liberal Party in those branch meetings when there's 100 people there. But come election day, your voters, your ballot is secret. It's private. Your donations under certain thresholds are also private. You should absolutely vote for, you mentioned One Nation, but any candidate from any party who is better than all the rest. Somebody else has said it in the comments this morning. Vote for the best candidate. Don't vote for the majors. That's exactly the right way to do it. You don't have to vote for them just because you're a member of them. You can be there, be an influence, long-term influence, be patient, but not be a supporter. And maybe there's a Liberal Party candidate 3 electorates away that's worth supporting when your own one isn't. That's totally fine. If you want to actually go volunteer on the other side of the city where nobody can recognize you for somebody not in your party, that's also a great idea. So I don't think you can, I think every party's constitution would ask you to not be a member of another party. So their own constitutions would probably ban that. But that's going to be, I think, the closest way of getting that kind of result. Bernie, your thoughts on Mark's question?
Well, I think, as you say, most parties, if not all parties, would say that you can only be in this party. So, you would not be able to be in, you not have dual membership of other parties. Look, I've been trying for 41 years to make the Liberal Party a more conservative party, and I have to admit that I've failed, and that distresses me. I have to say, the thing that really upsets me about the proposition that you put forward, Dave, is that we have to put up with a socialist government for 10 or maybe 15 years.
It is right.
to allow this process to happen. Now, how many generations of kids are going to have their minds destroyed by the socialist crap that they're being taught in schools?
Yeah.
How many generations of kids are going to be killed in abortuaries? Who are never going to get to school? How many small businesses are going to hit the wall because of incompetence from socialist governments? So much damage is going to happen over the next decade or 15 years, while we're buggerizing around in the background trying to get the numbers. That's what concerns me. I mean, it's not about what happens in the parties. What it should be about is what happens in the country, in the state, and the community. That's what it's about. And the sooner, we can't afford to muck around. The sooner we get it fixed, the better. We just can't wait any longer.
Can I just say, I think part of the problem why there's no young Conservatives coming up is because all of the major parties have their young Liberals and young whatever in universities. And I'm sorry, but universities are full of morons these days. And so perhaps there needs to be some young Conservative and young Liberal pathways in that aren't based in universities, that are simply open to try and encourage more people to come in there. Because I'm telling you now, even 15 years ago, geez, I'm getting old now. Even then, the university parties were terrible. They were enough to put anybody off joining politics. And so we are not getting a new line of Conservatives coming up because they wander into these places, go, this is rubbish, and they leave. That's not good enough for the parties. They have to do better. They have to have more open events, more debates, more interaction, more places for people to test their skills and to become better. I mean, that's something that the UK does that we don't do, and you can tell it in the difference. Like if you watch that stage, even Tony Abbott, who was a pretty good speaker, is so far behind the American and UK counterparts as far as running a crowd and leading a Conservative speech, because they do politics better in the UK. They simply do it better. They train their people better, and we are lacking that training. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can just go and have a look what they do and import that into Australia, colonize, dare I say, our political movement with some good skills.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally, Alexandra. And I have to say, one of the real highlights for me of the weekend's conference was the number of young people, the volunteers, and there were vast numbers of young people, and we're talking about late teens to early 20s who volunteered their time to put it all together, to stage it, to make it happen. And as I say, they were volunteers. They weren't paid. They did it all. They'd been putting up for it for months, and that gave me real hope. That there's another generation coming, which is going to make it better for all of us.
Brilliant. Heather says we should import Farage. I don't know if
yes,
that
I agree, absolutely.
Heather, you've got a couple of agreements here. Look, this could be a really long conversation. I think we've probably covered enough right now before we start drifting off on too many rabbit trails. I think the highlight for encouragement and optimism right now is CPAC itself. This movement, finding the coalescence of Conservatives, so many people from the minor parties coming together and finding out there's so much in common is fantastic. If only we can teach the majority of Australians how preferences work. My observation in the election was all of the nuance and policies really didn't matter at all. It came down to brand profile. And the local candidates and the local campaigns just seemed to make no difference to the electorate at large. Essentially, all of the freedom parties are talking to themselves. They're talking to people who already agree, and that is the voters that they get. And then it is shuffled according to budget, how the brand presence goes in that electorate. And that's sad, and I think that's a reflection on the caliber of voter in Australia generally. I don't think it's explainable by fraud or corruption. That does go on, I'm not dismissing it, but I don't think it's so significant that it explains the result that we had. I think the fact is Australians just love tyranny, love authoritarianism, and love big government as a public utility.
Dave, can I just say
final thoughts before we go around. Bernie, you first. Your final thoughts for the show.
One thing that horrifies me and thing that has really hit me in the face severely over the last 2.5 years is the level of ignorance of our system right across the country. People just don't know. They don't care. Maybe more people care now than did. But they think that because they don't understand it, they can have no impact. And that's probably true. But people should take the time to get involved. They should take the time to actually understand what's happening, how they can have an impact. Otherwise, the future of democracy in this country is very much at risk, because there is an increasing number of people who think the whole thing's rigged, that they are disenfranchised, and it doesn't matter what they do, they're going to get the same result. I think that is a dreadful state of affairs, and that's something that we really need to address as a matter of urgency.
Yeah, you're right, Bernie. And I heard, I think it was on Chris. What's that show that we were watching yesterday? Tim Poole. Tim Poole was saying on an episode that all the talk about fraud and corruption, while having large elements of factuality to it, the narrative itself demotivates people to participate in the system, thereby perpetuating the result that the corruptors wanted in the first place. So we have to actually understand the system and be in the system and vote and turn up if we wish to ever win it ever again. Alexandra, your final thoughts for the show.
Well, the Liberal Party has made the fatal mistake of forgetting that culture comes from the top down. So instead of trying to chase votes on the left and their socialist left-leaning audience, they are the ones who have to lead the ideological revolution. They have to set the standards. They have to set the principles. Their voice has to be leading the charge, and then their voters will follow them, and the narrative of society will change. They will never get anywhere while ever they try to placate these people in the Marxist groups or the collective of things. They have to be the leaders of our nation and start acting like leaders. Otherwise, no one will follow them. It's up to the Conservatives and the Liberal Party, as the largest conservative movement in the country, to lead us out of this complete hellhole that we find ourselves in. So all I can say is, please, if there's anybody in the Conservative Party who's still listening, stand up, ignore what your party is saying, and show us some strength of character.
Alexandra, how can people find more of and support the work you're doing to combat the lying harlot media?
Thank you for reminding me. I, of course, write for Dave Pellowe over at The Good Source. You can find me on Twitter at Ellie Melly, which is on your screen right now. And please subscribe and follow thespectator.com.au, where we bring these stories and these voices who are outspoken to light. We will always publish conservative and libertarian views from here and overseas. So thank you all for your support, and also support Dave, who is doing such a wonderful job, and Bernie, if you're in Victoria.
Absolutely.
And Bernie, to the many Victorians who are watching right now, I want to say I'm glad you're a member of the Liberal Party if you are. I'm glad you're a member of any party if you are. If you're not, at least join a party. But to those people who are members of the Liberal Party in Victoria, you can still vote for Bernie Finn at the upcoming election. Nobody will know, and they can't make it a condition of membership that you don't. How do people support you, Bernie?
Well, they can vote for me, or they can go to dlp.org.au and they can make a donation, or they can volunteer to assist, which is always very, very welcome. We are running in the upper house across the state. We're also running in selected lower house seats, but that will be dependent on who the sitting Liberal member is, or the Liberal candidate. We won't be supporting any Liberal lefties, but we will support those who are Liberals who are worth supporting. But any Conservative who wishes to support me is very, very welcome. dlp.org.au, and would love to have your support. And certainly as November approaches, just remember, this is D-Day. You know, in 4 years' time, there will be nothing left of Victoria if Andrews gets back. You know, don't muck around here. You know, don't think that you can come back and pick up the pieces in 4 years, because there's going to be no pieces in 4 years. It will be crushed.
100%. Gentlemen and lady, thank you very much for your contribution and opinions today on the show, as well as constantly in the trenches. Thank you very much.
Very great pleasure. Good to see you, Dave. Good to see you, Alexandra.
Thank you very much, boys.
Now, tickets are still on sale. Not still on sale. Tickets are on sale newly for Church and State Adelaide, as well as the March conference in Brisbane. Head to churchandstate.com.au there for a fantastic gathering of like-minded conservatives who believe that the kingdom of God actually has the best policy set. This nation, believe it or not, is culturally Christian. At the very least, that's the context and environment of the passions of Australians as we formed the Constitution. And we are not looking for a theocracy. We are looking for the best policy settings for the benefit of our neighbours, not our hip pockets. That would be pork barrelling. Be there in Adelaide on November 5 and in Brisbane on the 3rd and 4th of March. We're expecting a very large gathering in Brisbane, probably well over 500 people. But November 5 in Adelaide, tickets are selling fast. The capacity of the venue is limited to a couple of hundred people, so that's running out. Make sure you don't be slow so you don't miss out. That's at churchandstate.com.au. And as always, thank you to those people who are monthly supporters of the Good Source and myself personally, the work that we're doing to fight the influence and polluting effect of the lying harlot media. But that is it for this end of Pellowe Talk. As I said, we won't be back next Monday. We're going to go to a irregular show, and we're going to try and put all of our efforts into a daily news service. So we'll see how that works and evolves. Looking for volunteers to help out in any capacity, writing articles, doing research, perhaps doing video editing or some social media management. If you would like to be part of providing a service to all the millions of Australians who no longer watch the 6 o'clock news because they're sick of the fear porn and they're sick of the leftist lies that are constantly served in that open sewer called the mainstream media, then we would love your help. Yes, I'm a little bit passionate about the truth because it's one of the number one corrupting influences of politics and culture and parliaments in this nation. Would love your help. And if you can't volunteer sometime, perhaps you can volunteer $10 a month. It's going to be free for everyone for now. But we don't have the $1 billion plus budget of the ABC. So to do a really good job, deserving lots of eyeballs, we need your help. That's it for this episode. Thank you and goodbye.
Today, we need a special kind of courage. Not the kind needed in battle, but a kind which makes us stand up for everything that we know is right, everything that is true and honest. We need the kind of courage that can withstand the subtle corruption of the cynics, so that we can show the world that we are not afraid of the future.